Under the scorching sun of the barren Sahara Desert, Africans are quietly digging millions of half-moon shaped. At first glance, they don't look like anything special, but these simple structures are triggering a powerful transformation, bringing millions of acres of desert land back to life and turning them into green, fertile areas. This is the story of the Great Green Wall, one of the largest land restoration projects on Earth. So could this be the key to stopping desertification in Africa? And what did they do in this billion-dollar project? Let's find out. The Sahara Desert covers an area of approximately 9.2 million square kilometers, nearly the size of the United States, accounting for almost one-third of the African continent. And alarmingly, it is not stopping, but continues to expand rapidly year after year. Compared to the early 20th century, its area has increased by about 10 to nearly 20%. South of the Sahara lies the Sahel, a semi-arid belt stretching across more than 20 African countries, where hundreds of millions of people live and depend directly on the land for survival. The paradox is that the Sahel is not completely lacking in rainfall. Each year, the region still experiences short but intense rainy seasons. The real problem is that the land has been severely degraded. The soil surface has hardened, forming a water-repellent crust that prevents rainwater from soaking in. Instead, the water runs off quickly, causing flash floods before disappearing. The result is a dangerous vicious cycle. Prolonged drought destroys the soil, heavy rains cause erosion, and the land gradually loses its ability to retain water. Desertification, therefore, is not just a climate issue, but the collapse of an entire water-soil system. In response to this reality, the African Union launched an unprecedented initiative known as Africa's Great Green Wall in 2007. The project stretches approximately 8,000 kilometers across the Sahel belt, from the Atlantic coast in the west to the Red Sea in the east, involving more than 20 countries. However, the Great Green Wall is not a continuous wall of trees, as many people imagine. In reality, it is a mosaic network of ecosystem restoration, where each region applies different solutions based on local soil conditions, water availability, and livelihoods. In other words, the Great Green Wall does not try to force the desert to turn green. It reshapes how water, land, and people interact, allowing life to return on its own. For decades, tree planting was seen as the obvious solution to combat desertification in the Sahel. Billions of saplings were introduced into the region through large-scale campaigns, supported by billions of dollars in international aid. Yet most of these projects failed, not because of a lack of goodwill, but because they started at the wrong point. Young trees were planted into soil that had already lost its structure, could no longer retain water, and was nearly devoid of living microorganisms. When the rains arrived, water ran off too quickly. When the sun returned, surface temperatures rose sharply and moisture evaporated within hours. As a result, more than 80 to 90% of the saplings died after just 1 or 2 rainy seasons. Planting trees on dead soil is like installing a sophisticated machine on a collapsed foundation. The problem in the Sahel is not a lack of trees. It is the land's lost ability to sustain life. And from this issue, the Great Green Wall focuses on restoring degraded land by improving how water and soil function, rather than simply planting trees. It uses a range of local techniques to slow runoff, reduce erosion, and bring life back to farmland and ecosystems across the Sahel. At the core of these efforts is one crucial technique: digging half-moon pits to capture rainwater and revive the soil. The half-moon pit was chosen because water in the Sahel does not fall gently. It arrives in short, violent bursts and rushes downslope at high speed. A straight trench would simply channel this runoff away, but a curved, open-ended shape intercepts the flow from multiple angles, forcing water to slow, spread, and settle. The crescent form naturally reduces water velocity without trapping it completely, allowing gradual infiltration instead of overflow. This design works with gravity and terrain rather than against them, which is why the half-moon pit succeeds where other structures fail. The way half-moon pits are dug in Africa is not random. It follows a clear and deliberate technical process. First, contour lines on the slope are identified using ropes, stakes, and simple hand tools, ensuring that the pits are positioned perpendicular to the direction of runoff during heavy rain. Each pit has a crescent shape with its open side facing uphill to catch incoming water, while the back of the pit sits on the lower side to hold it in place. A typical pit measures about 4 to 6 meters in diameter and only 20 to 40 centimeters deep, with an outer earth bund rising 25 to 50 centimeters high. The pits are not dug deep because the goal is not to store water like a pond, but to slow runoff long enough for it to infiltrate the soil. Spaced roughly 8 to 15 meters apart and aligned in parallel rows along the contour, the pits form a stepped hydraulic system. The entire process requires only hose, shovels, and manual labor. On average, one person can complete a single pit in about an hour, making the method low-cost and highly scalable. After the pits are dug, farmers spread seeds of native grasses, such as andropogon or centrus, inside the pits. These grasses are highly drought-resistant and develop deep, fibrous root systems that help stabilize the soil and improve infiltration. Once established, they trap organic matter and moisture, creating the first living layer that allows the soil to recover. In practice, the impact of half-moon pits becomes clearly visible after 2 to 5 years. What initially starts as patches of grass gradually expands into continuous ground cover, with vegetation density increasing season after season. Studies and field results in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Senegal show that restored areas can reach 40–60% vegetation cover, compared to near zero before intervention. More importantly, this is not just grass returning. Improved soil moisture and structure allow shrubs and native trees to regenerate naturally, reconnecting fragmented habitats. Over time, insects, small animals, and grazing systems return, turning isolated green patches into functioning ecosystems rather than temporary vegetation islands. Beyond ecological recovery, the half-moon pit approach also creates livelihoods. As soil fertility improves, many communities are able to grow crops such as millet and maize again, providing food, income, and seasonal employment through land preparation, maintenance, and harvesting. The results of this method are remarkably strong despite its extremely low cost. Local communities can dig the pits by hand, maintain them themselves, and gradually expand the system over time. Tree planting is a direct intervention, while half-moon pits act as a system trigger. And in the harsh conditions of the Sahel, it is this system-based approach that delivers results that are fast, durable, and scalable. Beyond ecological recovery, the half-moon pit approach also creates livelihoods. Field projects in Niger and Burkina Faso show that restored land can increase millet and maize yields by 50 to 100%, while bringing thousands of hectares back into production. This directly translates into food security, household income, and seasonal employment for entire communities through digging, maintenance, and harvesting. Following half-moon pits, another widely used restoration method across Africa is the sand dam. This technique involves building a low concrete or stone wall across seasonal riverbeds to trap sand carried by flash floods. As sand accumulates upstream of the dam, it forms a natural underground reservoir capable of storing millions of liters of water within the sand itself, protected from evaporation. Unlike open reservoirs, up to 90% of the water stored in a sand dam is lost to evaporation, a problem sand dams largely avoid by keeping water underground. The stored water can be accessed year-round through shallow wells, supporting drinking water, small-scale irrigation, and livestock during long dry seasons. Sand dams are most common in East Africa, particularly in Kenya, where more than 1,000 sand dams have been built, along with projects in Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. Field studies show that communities using sand dams can triple local water availability, reduce erosion, and significantly increase agricultural output. Today, sand dams are considered one of the most reliable and scalable water harvesting solutions for dryland regions with seasonal rivers. Another widely used land restoration technique in the Great Green Wall is the stone line, also known as stone bunds or contour stone lines. This method involves placing rows of loose stones along contour lines across gently sloping land to interrupt surface runoff. During heavy seasonal rains, the stone lines slow down flowing water, allowing sediments and organic matter to settle instead of being washed away. Over time, fine soil accumulates behind the stones, gradually rebuilding fertile topsoil where crops and grasses can grow. Stone lines also increase water infiltration, recharge soil moisture, and reduce erosion without blocking water completely. The technique has been widely applied in Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and Ethiopia, particularly in farming areas with degraded soils. Field results show that stone lines can increase crop yields by 30–80%, especially for millet and sorghum, while requiring only local stone and manual labor. Because they are durable, low-cost, and easy to maintain, stone lines often remain effective for decades, forming a long-term backbone of dryland restoration systems. So you've learned about the process of regreening the desert in Africa. But don't leave yet, because now we're moving on to China to see if their approach to combating desert regreening is any different from Africa's. For centuries, northern China has lived with an invisible enemy: sand. Each time monsoon winds swept down from the Gobi and Taklamakan deserts, massive dust storms blanketed the skies over Beijing, turning day into night. By the 1990s, there were years when residents in the capital had to wear masks for more than 80 days, just to avoid breathing in the fine dust blowing from the desert. The Taklamakan Desert was formed millions of years ago, when the Tian Shan Mountains to the north and the Kunlun Mountains to the south blocked nearly all moisture from the Indian Ocean and Siberia, turning the basin between them into a vast arid wasteland. Average rainfall here is less than 100 millimeters per year, almost 10 times lower than in California, a region already known for its dry heat. To put that in perspective, every square meter of Taklamakan's land receives only about the same amount of water as a 500 milliliter bottle per week. Far too little for any plant to survive. Faced with the growing threat of desertification, China chose not to back down. In 1978, the government launched a century-scale initiative, the 3 North Shelter Belt Program, known to the world as the Green Great Wall. This is not a single forest wall, but rather a vast network of thousands of forests, windbreak belts, and ecological lakes stretching more than 4,500 kilometers, from the Xinjiang Autonomous Region all the way to Heilongjiang Province, covering nearly the entire northern part of China. The goal, to plant 35 million hectares of new forest by 2050, increasing the country's forest coverage from just 10% in 1949 to over 25% today. It is considered the largest human-made project ever built on land, not with concrete or steel, but with determination and the color green of life itself. From here, humanity's dream of reviving the dead lands truly began. So what exactly did the Chinese do in this billion-dollar program? They began not with concrete or heavy machinery, but with a measured plan. Across the Taklamakan Desert, Chinese engineers surveyed the terrain using satellite mapping and drones to analyze dune movement and wind direction. Based on those data, they designed a massive grid system. Straw checkerboards laid diagonally across the sand, each square about 20 by 20 feet. Across the burning dunes of western China, straw is spread out in neat geometric patterns. From above, the land looks like a gigantic checkerboard of golden squares stretching all the way to the horizon. Yet behind that simple image lies a massive engineering operation, complex, expensive, and carried out under brutal conditions. Millions of pounds of straw are transported hundreds of miles into the heart of the desert, where vehicles often sink into soft sand and paved roads simply don't exist. Once there, teams of workers begin by digging shallow trenches and placing bundles of straw into precise grid lines. Under the relentless sun, with temperatures rising above 49 degrees Celsius and no shade in sight, every movement feels like a battle against heat and exhaustion. Still, thousands of Chinese workers persist. Because each grid of straw is more than just a barrier, it's the foundation for life to return. The woven pattern stabilizes the shifting dunes, slows the wind, and creates microzones where moisture can linger long enough for planting to begin. Once the grid is in place, mechanical augers and planting machines move in. These machines drill small holes at the center of each square, preparing the soil for drought-resistant species such as saxaul, desert poplar, and red willow. The seedlings, carefully nurtured in nurseries before being brought to the desert, are then transplanted into each hole at the center of the straw grid. Each young plant is positioned with precision so that its fragile roots settle just below the surface, where the straw layer shields them from the scorching sun and the shifting sand. Workers add a measured amount of water and compact the soil around the base to ensure that the roots make full contact with the moist layer beneath. As weeks go by, the protective grid continues to serve its purpose. The straw keeps the surface cooler, reduces evaporation, and prevents the fine sand from eroding around the seedlings. Over time, the straw gradually decomposes through wind, dew, and microorganisms, turning into an organic blanket rich in nutrients. This natural fertilizer feeds the developing root systems, helping them extend deeper into the stable soil layers below. What began as a few fragile seedlings slowly evolves into a living network of vegetation, a green framework that anchors the dunes and begins the long process of reclaiming the desert. So, you've explored all the ways Africans and Chinese are combating desertification. Do you know of any other methods? Let us know. See you in the next videos.